In the decade of the 370s, northern China, after suffering from 3 generations of chaos due to barbarian invasions, was finally unified under the former Qin Dynasty, a barbarian state established by the Di people. In southern China, the Eastern Jin Dynasty, ruled by Han Chinese elites from the north who have fled the barbarian invasions, continued to suffer from near-constant factional strife. A showdown will soon take place between the two sides to determine the fate of China. The Di people who ruled over the former Qin dynasty were Proto-Tibetans who, over the few prior centuries, had slowly migrated eastward into the foothills of the Tibetan plateau, including the Fei River valley near the ancient capital of Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an. They were counted among the 5 barbarians, the Xiongnu, Jie, Xianbei, Qiang, and Di, that had revolted against Jin dynasty rule around the year 300, although they were more Sinicized than most of the other barbarian groups on this list. One branch of the Di established in the mountainous southwestern Shu region, a state known in history as Chenghan, which ruled from 304 until its conquest in 347 by the Eastern Jin Dynasty general Huan Wen, whose family fortunes were based out of the nearby Mid-Yangtze region. Meanwhile, other branches of the Di remained in northwestern China, where they first came under the control of the Xiongnu state of former Zhao and then the Jie state of later Zhao. After later Zhao conquered much of northern China in the late 320s to early 330s, a large number of Di, as well as Qiang, a closely related Proto-Tibetan group, was forcibly resettled from the Wei River Valley to Hebei, the portion of the North China Plain north of the Yellow River, close to the later Zhao political center at the city of Ye. In 350, as later Zhao collapsed and a new power vacuum emerged in northern China, the Murong Xianbei, who had already established the state of former Yan, rode down onto the North China Plain, while the Di and the Qiang migrated back to their ancestral lands in the Wei River Valley in large numbers. The Di, under their leader Fu Jian, subjugated the Qiang and other local inhabitants of the Wei River Valley, and in 351 established a state with its capital at Chang'an. This state was named Qin and became known in history as Former Qin, with Qin being the geographical name of the Wei River Valley, from where the ancient state of Qin conquered the 6 eastern states during the Warring States period to unify China in 221 BC. Chang'an had previously been the splendid capital of the Western Han Dynasty for over 200 years, but since the city was sacked by the Red Eyebrows rebels in 26 AD during the Han Dynasty interregnum and the capital was moved east to Luoyang, Chang'an had remained a fairly provincial city over the ensuing 330 years. While Luoyang prospered as a new political center of China. Under former Qin, Chang'an again became the capital of a dynasty. Former Qin started out as a vassal of the Eastern Jin Dynasty until Fu Jian declared himself emperor in 352, severing ties between the two. An Eastern Jin army under Huan Wen invaded former Qin in 354 and came within a hair's breadth of taking Chang'an, but was eventually forced to withdraw due to former Qin's scorched earth tactics. In 355, the throne of former Qin was succeeded by Fu Sheng, one of the most deranged tyrants in Chinese history, although many historians, both ancient and modern, have suspected that much of his supposed brutality was likely propaganda from his enemies. But according to the traditional accounts, Fu Sheng was born blind in one eye, and after becoming emperor would murder anyone who used words such as inadequate, without, missing, or handicapped. One time, a physician was explaining to him the benefits of ginseng and said, "It may seem small, but it is very useful." Fu Sheng had the eyes of the physician gouged out before executing him. He set up torture devices in the hall of his palace and murdered the people around him, including key ministers, on whims, such as when he ordered a minister to pour wine for the other ministers. But because not everyone became blackout drunk, he pulled out a bow and shot the minister to death. He also enjoyed animal abuse, such as skinning livestock or boiling birds alive. There are many other things he's accused of, although this video is meant to be PG. In 357, Fu Sheng was finally deposed and murdered by a cousin of his named Fu Jian. To be clear, Fu Jian, the founding emperor of the former Qin dynasty, and Fu Jian are two separate people. Their names just so happen to be pronounced very similarly in modern Chinese, although the tones are different. Fu Jian was well educated in the Confucian classics, and as emperor, even though he preferred the title Heavenly King instead, he tried his best best to mold the former Qin government structure after a traditional Chinese centralized bureaucratic state. To this end, he relied heavily on Wang Meng, a Han Chinese scholar who had lived in poverty in his youth, at one point making a living selling baskets. When Huan Wen's army was threatening to take Chang'an in 354, Wang Meng visited Huan Wen in his camp and gave Huan Wen a long speech breaking down the political situation in China at the time, all while nonchalantly reaching inside his dirty robes to catch fleas in front of the gathered VIPs. But even though Wang Meng left a strong impression on Huan Wen, he ultimately rejected a lucrative job offer from Huan Wen to stay behind in the north. At some point over the next few years, we no longer have records of when or how Wang Meng met Fu Jian and saw something in him that he did not see in Huan Wen. The two of them formed a leadership team that has been described as a poor man's Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang, with Wang Meng emulating Zhuge Liang's strategic vision and organizational genius, and Fu Jian emulating Liu Bei's outward benevolence and concern for the common people. Fu Jian delegated much of the day-to-day task of running his government to Wang Meng, who, with Fu Jian's backing, stripped the tribal nobles of their powers, executing those who stepped out of line. He also encouraged agriculture and organized the repair of irrigation canals, helping to bring about a rare period of prosperity to the Wei River Valley during this chaotic time. Former Qin continued to expand under Fu Jian, who tried to incorporate his enemies, such as Yao Chang, a Qiang from a defeated tribe, into his government rather than squashing them. In 369, former Qin's much more powerful neighbor to the east, former Yan, ruled by the Murong tribe of the Xianbei, was undergoing an internal power struggle. Murong Cui, the highly popular war hero uncle of the former Yan emperor, had just defeated another northern expedition led by Huan Wen, but was then targeted by both the Dowager Empress and Murong Ping, a highly corrupt, avaricious member of the former Yan imperial family. Fearing for his life, Murong Cui fled the former Yan capital at Ye for Longcheng, the ancestral capital of former Yan on the northern frontier, but was soon pursued by his enemies. In desperation, he changed course and defected to former Qin. Fu Jian was ecstatic to have such a talented rival join him, but Wang Meng did not trust Murong Cui and suggested that Fu Jian get rid of him instead. Fu Jian ignored Wang Meng's advice. As Wang Meng set out on a military expedition against former Yan, he requested that Murong Ling, the son of Murong Cui, go with him as a guide. The night before the expedition was to head out, Wang Meng paid a surprise visit to Murong Cui, and as their conversation was winding down, asked Murong Cui for a memento. Murong Cui easily agreed and gave Wang Meng his sword. Wang Meng led his army toward Luoyang, whose defenders surrendered without a fight. While in Luoyang, he bribed a confidant of Murong Cui and had him deliver the sword to Murong Ling along with a fake verbal message from Murong Cui, telling Murong Ling that Murong Cui had just defected back to former Yan, and Murong Ling should do the same. Murong Ling agonized over what to do next, but finally chose to believe the story, especially since how else could the messenger have his father's sword? When Murong Cui heard news that his son had just defected back to former Yan, he panicked and immediately tried to escape from Chang'an, but was captured. Wang Meng had just successfully framed Murong Cui for treason, and most rulers would have had Murong Cui executed. But Fu Jian was not most rulers, and simply forgave Murong Cui, telling him there was nothing for him to fear and restoring him to his former position at court. Murong Ling, on the other hand, was arrested after he returned home and exiled to the frontier, where he was later killed after trying to start another rebellion. And as for Wang Meng, his later reputation was tainted by the extreme treachery he displayed against Murong Cui, which directly contradicted the traditional Confucian virtues of using trust and benevolence to win over one's enemies, especially someone as talented as Murong Cui. The former Qin army continued to advance under Wang Meng, capturing Jinyang, modern-day Taiyuan. In late 370, Murong Ping was sent to oversee the former Yan army defending the highlands of Shangdang that overlooked Ye. Even in this critical moment, Murong Ping continued to enrich himself. He ordered his soldiers to guard the paths leading to the nearby forests and springs, charging the peasants a fee to collect firewood and water. His greed caused the morale of his soldiers to collapse, and in the ensuing battle, multiple former Yan generals defected to former Qin. The former Yan army was crushed, and Murong Ping fled back to Ye, where he and the former Yan emperor abandoned Ye for Longcheng. The emperor was captured en route to the north, ending the former Yan dynasty. Murong Ping made it all the way to Goguryeo, where he was arrested and sent back to former Qin. He, too, was spared by Fu Jian, although in this case sparing Murong Ping likely damaged Fu Jian's popularity with his newly conquered former Yan subjects. The conquest of former Yan brought almost all of northern China under the control of former Qin. A few years later, in 373, former Qin conquered the southwestern Shu region from the Eastern Jin Dynasty. And finally, in 376, it conquered both the Tuoba Xianbei state of Dai on the edge of the northern steppe and the Han Chinese state of former Liang in the far northwest, finally unifying all of northern China for the first time in almost 80 years. With northern China now under his control, Fu Jian increasingly turned his eyes toward unifying China by conquering the Eastern Jin Dynasty. Wang Meng died prematurely of illness in 375, a year before unification in the north had been completed. On his deathbed, he warned Fu Jian against invading the south, because even though the Eastern Jin Dynasty was weak and politically fractured, most people in China still saw it as the rightful government in China and regarded Fu Jian as a foreign occupier. Instead, Fu Jian should first focus on his real enemies, the other barbarian tribes in the north, especially the Xianbei and the Qiang. These newly conquered tribes only submitted to former Qin because they were forced to do so and could rebel at any given opportunity. Certainly, even though Fu Jian had by then controlled all of northern China, his rule was tenuous at best. The Di were not a particularly numerous people, and its population was concentrated in the Wei River Valley. The vast North China plain to the east was inhabited almost completely by the Xianbei and local ethnic Han Chinese, neither of whom cared much for former Qin rule. In response to this, Fu Jian initiated large-scale population exchanges, forcibly resettling large numbers of his Di tribesmen out of the Wei River Valley into the newly conquered territories, and replacing them in the Wei River Valley with Xianbei, Han Chinese, and other tribes. This was nothing new. All throughout Chinese history, it was customary to resettle large numbers of conquered peoples near the capital. But because Fu Jian also simultaneously resettled large numbers of his own people away from the capital, if rebellions were to take place against him, he could count on very few people close by for support. Faced with an existential threat from the north, the politicians in the south finally took a break from the near-constant bickering among themselves. A few years prior, in 373, Huan Wen, from the Huan clan of Qiao Principality, was inches away from usurping the throne before dying of illness, and the central government in Jiankang came under the control of a triumvirate that comprised of Xie An, from the Xie clan of Chen Commandery, Wang Biaozhi from the Wang clan of Langya, and Wang Tanzhi from the Wang clan of Taiyuan. Despite the bad blood that existed between the Huans and the other elite families, Xie An managed to broker a deal that allowed members of the Huan family, especially Huan Chong, the younger brother of Huan Wen, to retain the upriver military command in Jing province, where the Huans had strong local ties. Wang Biaozhi and Wang Tanzhi both died of illness not long after which Xie An gained control of the central government in Jiankang, working together with the upriver Huan Chong to form a unified front against former Qin. Xie An appointed his nephew Xie Xuan to the military command of the region around the cities of Jingkou and Guangling, immediately to the east of Jiankang. This region was heavily settled by northern refugees and militias, providing Xie Xuan with a large number of battle-hardened, motivated recruits. The resulting army, known as the Beifu Army, or the Northern Headquarters Army in English, became the main force defending Jiankang. In 378 to 379, the former Qin army captured the strategic city of Xiangyang after a year-long siege, although counterattacks from Huan Chong prevented it from advancing further south down the Han River. In the east, the former Qin army captured Pengcheng, modern-day Xuzhou, crossed the Huai River, and approached the north bank of the Yangtze River, but desperate counterattacks from the newly formed Northern Headquarters Army under Xie Xuan eventually drove it back across the Huai River. By late 382, Fu Jian had become increasingly determined to conquer the south once and for all, and a heated debate took place at the court in Chang'an regarding the decision. Both Mu Rongchui and Yao Chang, who came from conquered peoples, strongly supported the invasion, whereas many members of Fu Jian's Di inner circle opposed the war, arguing that the south was unified under Xie An's leadership and determined to fight to the end, and that the Yangtze River was a formidable barrier. Frustrated, Fu Jian snapped back. If all of my soldiers were to throw their horsewhips into the Yangtze, it would stop the river from flowing. This became the origin of the Chinese idiom, 头边断流, literally meaning throwing the whips to stop the river from flowing, to describe a large army. Fu Jian's desire for war ultimately prevailed. He was so confident of victory that he preemptively offered Emperor Xiaowu of the Eastern Jin Dynasty, Xie An, and Huan Chong high-ranking positions in his government, and prepared residences in Chang'an for them to live in. To buy the south more time against the inevitable attack, Huan Chong organized another preemptive attack against former Qin in mid-383, with one prong directed against Xiangyang and another prong westward into the Shu region. but after some initial progress, he was again forced to withdraw. Around the same time, Fujian ordered one of the largest army musters in Chinese history. All horses in former Qin territories were requisitioned, and 1 out of 10 of all fighting-age men were drafted. The final army was supposed to have been approximately 1 million strong, although realistically this number was highly exaggerated, and a large percentage of the soldiers were likely supply troops and auxiliaries anyway. Armies were hastily assembled across former Qin and sent haphazardly southward. In the southwest, Yao Chang oversaw a naval operation down the Yangtze River, mimicking the invasion route of the Western Jin Dynasty against Eastern Wu almost exactly 100 years prior. This army was so poorly organized and had so few ships that its attack went absolutely nowhere. In the northeast, soldiers gathered in Hebei and began the long, slow march southward in July of the Chinese calendar, with the vanguard barely arriving at Pengcheng in September, still too far away from the front lines to be of much use. The main invasion force set out from Chang'an. By September, even as a 250,000-strong vanguard of Fu Rong, the younger brother of Fu Jian, was beginning to travel down the Ying River into the Huai River. Large contingents of soldiers from the far northwestern frontiers were still just arriving at Chang'an. Columns of former Qin soldiers stretched on and on for hundreds of kilometers between Chang'an and the Huai River frontier. Fu Jian himself arrived at Xiangcheng, not far upstream from the confluence of the Ying and Huai rivers, to oversee the whole operation. Mu Rongchui, who until now had been marching under Fu Rong, was diverted southward with 30,000 soldiers to attack the city of Yuncheng. The remainder of the former Qin vanguard under Fu Rong pressed on towards Shouchun, although during this time period the city was renamed Shouyang to observe the naming taboo of the mother of Emperor Jian. Shouyang was a key city protecting the line of the Huai River. If the northern army were to capture Shouyang, it could then sail down the Huai River into the Hangou Canal and then into the Yangtze River, threatening Jiankang. On the Eastern Jin side, Xie appointed his younger brother Xie Shi as the commander-in-chief of the 80,000-strong Eastern Jin field army, even though he was mostly just a figurehead appointed based on nepotism, and much of the decision was made by his generals, including Xie Xuan. As the threat of the former Qin invasion loomed over the horizon, there was understandably a great deal of panic in Jiankang. Xie helped to stabilize the situation by maintaining an air of absolute calmness and confidence, still visiting his countryside and playing games of Go as if nothing major was going on. On the front line, the Eastern Jin general Hu Bin led a 5,000-strong relief force towards Shouyang, but the city fell to Fu Rong in October 383 before he arrived, and Hu Bin was forced to take up defensive positions nearby. Fu Rong, now based out of Shouyang, ordered his general Liang Cheng eastward with 50,000 men to cut off Hu Bin's escape route along the Huai River. Still further to the east, Xie Shi and Xie Xuan arrived with the rest of the Eastern Jin army, setting up camp to the east of Liangcheng. Hu Bin's army soon began to run low on food, and in desperation, Hu Bin wrote a letter to Xie Shi explaining the dire situation. The letter was intercepted by former Qin soldiers, and after Fu Rong read it, he excitedly wrote to Fu Jian that the Eastern Jin army was outnumbered and that Fu Jian should join him at Shouyang. After Fu Jian read the letter from Fu Rong, he immediately left Xiangcheng for Shouyang in secret with 8,000 light cavalry. After arriving at Shouyang, Fu Jian sent a messenger named Zhu Xu to convince the Eastern Jin generals to surrender. Years prior, Zhu Xu had been the Eastern Jin general commanding the Xiangyang garrison and was taken prisoner by former Qin after the fall of Xiangyang in 379. He was offered a job in the former Qin government by Fu Jian, which he accepted, although he presumably remained loyal to the Eastern Jin Dynasty over the previous 4 years, because as soon as he arrived at the Eastern Jin camp, he gave Xie Shi and Xie Xuan the insider scoop on the former Qin army, including the classified intel that Fu Jian had secretly arrived at Shouyang. Zhu Xu also suggested that because the bulk of the former Qin army had yet to arrive at Shouyang, the best chance of victory for Eastern Jin was to immediately seek out an engagement, break the morale of the former Qin army, and then press on their advantage. In November, Liu Laozhi, a general in the northern headquarters army, forced a crossing across the Luo Creek with 5,000 men against Liang Cheng's army. Up to 15,000 former Qin soldiers, including Liang Cheng, were killed in the ensuing fighting, many of whom drowned in the Huai River while trying to escape. Afterwards, Xie Shi and Xie Xuan brought their entire army all the way to the walls of Shouyang. As Fu Jian stood atop the city walls to look down at the Eastern Jin army gathered before him, his nerves got the best of him, and as his vision grew blurry, his his gaze fell onto the nearby Bagong Mountains, and he mistook the grass and trees on the slopes for even more Eastern Jin soldiers. Now visibly displaying fear, he turned and complained to Fu Rong. "The enemy has a magnificent army. What did you mean to tell me that they are weak and outnumbered?" This became the origin of a very famous idiom associated with this battle, 草木皆兵, or literally, to mistake the grass and trees for soldiers, and meaning to be overwhelmed by a situation to the point of panic. Xie Xuan sent a message to Fu Rong, suggesting that their two sides meet in battle for a decisive encounter. But since the former Qin army was encamped immediately west of the Fei River, he proposed that it should first retreat a little bit to make space for the Eastern Jin army to cross the river, after which the two sides could fight. Most of the former Qin generals opposed the proposal, reasoning that since they outnumbered the Eastern Jin army anyway, and could easily fend off any Eastern Jin attacks from across the Fei River, why bother with such an unnecessary maneuver? But Fu Jian overruled his generals, because he thought that he could launch a surprise attack as the Eastern Jin army was crossing the river. The former Qin army began to retreat, but it was difficult to coordinate the movements of so many soldiers in such a tight space, and chaos ensued. At this critical moment, Xie Xuan launched an all-out attack across the Fei River. Fu Rong desperately tried to rally his men, but his horse collapsed under him, and he was killed by Eastern Jin soldiers. Zhu Xu, still in the former Qin camp, incited even more mass panic by shouting, "The battle is lost!" Countless former Qin soldiers either stampeded one another to death or were cut down by the pursuing Eastern Jin soldiers, and even among the initial survivors, a large percentage of them eventually died of starvation or cold exposure in the dead of winter. They panicked so much as they fled the battlefield that they mistook even the sound of the wind blowing or cranes singing for their pursuers. This is the origin of another idiom associated with the Battle of the Fei River, 风声鹤唳, literally, the sound of the wind and the singing of the cranes, also meaning to panic and overreact at the first sign of trouble. When news of the victory reached Xie, he was again playing a game of Go with a guest. He read the report and then went back to the game as if nothing had happened. His guest could no longer contain his curiosity and asked Xie if there was any news from the front lines. "Oh, the kids have just crushed the enemies." But as much as Xie still tried to maintain his outward calmness, as he walked through a door later that day, he accidentally chipped off a part of his shoe against the threshold of the door without even realizing it. After escaping across the Huai River, Fu Jian encountered Mu Rongchui with his still intact 30,000-strong army. Multiple members of Mu Rongchui's inner circle, including his younger brother Mu Rongde and son Mu Rongbao, tried to convince Mu Rongchui to murder the helpless Fu Jian and rebel. But Mu Rongchui was a wily old politician, and he must have understood that given the chaotic situation immediately after such a big battle, murdering Fu Jian in cold blood would have been a high-risk move. He refused their suggestions, and explained that because Fu Jian had given them asylum years ago despite all of Wang Meng's treachery, they should first pay back Fu Jian by offering him protection, and then wait for Fu Jian to mess up even more before rebelling. That way, they could fulfill their ambitions and gain popular support for their righteousness. And even if they were to rebel, they should still only seize their ancestral lands in the east, while leaving the Wei River Valley and the west to the Di. As Fu Jian and Mu Rongchui made their way toward Luoyang, scattered rebellions began to break out across northern China against former Qin. In Luoyang, Mu Rongchui finally asked Fu Jian for permission to return home to Hebei so that he could pay his respects at the tombs of his ancestors, while raising an army to help put down the rebellions. Fu Jian approved and sent Mu Rongchui to Ye under the command of Fu Jian's son, Fu Pi. After arriving in Hebei, Mu Rongchui began plotting with the local Xianbei elites to overthrow Fu Pi. But Fu Pi did not trust Mu Rongchui either, and sent him southward back across the Yellow River to suppress a local rebellion. Fu Pi only gave Mu Rongchui 2,000 poorly equipped soldiers for the job, while giving a Di general named Fu Feilong another 1,000 Di soldiers to accompany Mu Rongchui. He also secretly gave Fu Feilong instructions to do away with Mu Rongchui if the opportunity were to arise. Mu Rongchui found out about the plot from informers, and as he enlarged his own army with fresh recruits, launched a surprise attack against Fu Feilong in December 383, massacring the entire Di contingent of 1,000 men. He soon recruited a large army of his own, and in 384 declared himself the king of Yan, with this iteration of the dynasty known in history as Later Yan. Mu Rongchui led his army back across the Yellow River and besieged Ye. His army attacked Ye relentlessly with siege ladders, bored tunnels under the walls, and even flooded the city with water from the nearby Zhang River, but the city held firm. Meanwhile, in addition to later Yan, rebellions also broke out against former Qin in other regions of China. On the edge of the Tibetan Plateau, a branch of the Xianbei who had lived in the region for generations declared its own state, also named Qin, so it became known in history as Western Qin. The Qiang also rebelled under the leadership of Yao Chang, who, again displaying an absurd lack of creativity with names, also named his dynasty Qin, with this one known in history as Later Qin. The Xianbei that had previously been forcibly resettled in the Fei River Valley, including many extended members of the Murong family, also rebelled, and after multiple coups within their ranks, power fell to Murongchong, the younger brother of the last emperor of the former Yan dynasty. This dynasty was also named, you guessed it, Yan, and so became known in history as Western Yan. Because much of the depopulation in the Fei River Valley had already been resettled across northern China by Fujian, and because large numbers of these soldiers had been killed at the Battle of the Fei River, Fujian had very little left to defend against a Western Yan invasion, and Chang'an was soon besieged by Western Yan forces. With political order rapidly falling apart across the north, Eastern Jin seized the opportunity to launch yet another northern expedition. In the west, Huan Chong had died of illness in 384, and other members of the Huan family easily conquered both the Shu region in the southwest and the traditional Jin capital of Luoyang in the central plains. In the east, the northern headquarters army under Xie Xuan pushed all the way to the Yellow River, meeting minimal resistance along the way. In 385, Liu Laozhi led the vanguard of the northern headquarters army across the Yellow River, and in the case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, allied with Fu Pi to lift the siege of Ye. Liu Laozhi continued to pursue Murong Chui northward, but was ambushed, defeated in battle, and forced to retreat south across the Yellow River. In the northwest, the siege of Chang'an continued. As the city began to run out of food, Fujian made an escape with a small band of followers, only to fall into the hands of later Qin forces under Yao Chang, who eventually demanded that Fujian abdicate the throne to him. Fujian refused, angrily denouncing Yao Chang as a traitor, and was finally strangled to death in secret. Fujian's name is inextricably linked to the Battle of the Fei River, one of the greatest battles in Chinese history, the immediate effect of which was to prevent the full barbarian conquest of China. Fujian became the ultimate traditional Chinese cautionary tale against hubris. Although, as many historians have commented, he likely made the hasty decision to invade the south because he had little choice. Since the barbarians were still widely considered to be foreign occupiers, and most people across China still looked to the Eastern Jin court in Jiankang as the legitimate government of China, any barbarian state, like later Zhao or former Yan, was bound to be highly unstable due to a lack of buy-in from other barbarian groups and the local Han Chinese. Even in the few years leading up to the Battle of the Fei River, rebellions against Fujian were already breaking out across northern China. Of course, the standard way of dealing with these problems would have been to first focus on crushing the rebellions and building internal stability before even thinking about attacking another power. But Fujian took the opposite approach and thought that if he were to seize political legitimacy from the Eastern Jin Dynasty ASAP, then he could use that as leverage to maintain the long-term stability of his dynasty. The fighting in Hebei between Murong Chui, Fu Pi, and Liu Laozhi caused famines to break out in the region. The situation was so dire that Murong Chui banned the raising of silkworms so that his soldiers could feed on the mulberries. This, in combination with Western Yan forces besieging Chang'an, finally convinced Fu Pi to abandon Ye and make his way west. As he reached the city of Jinyang, modern-day Taiyuan, he heard news of Fujian's death, and so declared himself the next emperor of former Qin. With Fu Pi out of the way, Murong Chui finally got his hands on Ye. In late 385, he established his capital further north at Zhongshan, modern-day Dingzhou, and then declared himself the emperor of later Yan in 386. His dream of restoring the Yan dynasty was complete. Also in 386, Murongchong, the emperor of Western Yan, was killed by his subordinates, and after many more rounds of murders and coups, power in Western Yan fell into the hands of Murongyong, who submitted to Murong Chui. Murongyong asked Fu Pi for safe passage through former Qin territory so that he and his people could resettle in later Yan territories under Murong Chui. Fu Pi obviously refused, and his army was defeated in the subsequent battle. Fu Pi escaped south and was soon killed by Eastern Jin forces. The Xianbei Western Yan forces under Murongyong continued their eastward migration towards later Yan, but before they reached their destination, Murongyong had a change of heart, declared himself emperor, and massacred all of Murong Chui's immediate family members still in his camp. The north continued to fall apart. A few years prior, in 382, Fujian had sent a D general named Lu Guang on a long-distance expedition to conquer the Tarim Basin on the Silk Road connecting China to the rest of Asia. Lu Guang successfully completed the expedition, but as he was making his way back home, he saw the chaos that was breaking out in the rest of northern China, and so stayed put in Liang province and eventually founded his own dynasty there. This dynasty was also named Liang, and so became known in history as Later Liang, not to be confused with the later Liang dynasty in the early 900s AD during the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period. The characters are different, but are unfortunately pronounced exactly the same in modern Standard Chinese. In the far north, the Tuoba Xianbei re-established the state of Dai, but likely because Dai is the geographical name of a fairly remote border region of China, its name was almost immediately changed to the much more prestigious name of Wei, even though at the time it had nothing to do with the actual region of Wei located around the city of Ye. This became the Northern Wei dynasty, which would soon play a major role in Chinese history. All that was left of the former Qin Dynasty, which just a few years prior had ruled all of northern China, was a rump state in the northwest. This tiny state still managed to cause all kinds of trouble for later Qin until its eventual conquest by later Qin in 394. While all this was going on in the north, the Eastern Jin Dynasty again fell victim to its worst enemy, court politics. The Xie family under Xian had been dominating southern politics for the best part of a decade, and once the existential threat from the north was destroyed at the Fei River, members of other political factions immediately began to resent its power. Emperor Xiaowu had recently reached adulthood, and he, along with his younger brother Sima Daozi, began to build a coalition against Xian with the Langya and Taiyuan Wangs. Faced with growing political pressure, Xian left the capital in 385 to take up a regional command and died of illness a few months later. He was already 65 years old when he died, a very ancient age for someone who had gone through as many stressful situations as he did, and foul play was not mentioned in the historical texts. Since his death, Xian has remained one of the most admired political figures in Chinese history, and it is not hard to see why. He had seemingly everything when he was young: a good family background, charisma, artistic talents, large circles of friends, and even got to live out his 20s and 30s in leisure, rubbing shoulders with the greatest calligrapher of all time. He did not even take up politics until his 40s, and even then he quickly rose to the top, controlled the government for a decade, maintained the trust of his sovereign and colleagues during a critical time, lived up to that trust by saving the empire from destruction, and managed to do all of this with superhuman coolness. And then, at the first sign of reckoning from his enemies, he had the wisdom to resign from power, preserving both his good name and shielding his family from further purges. Even the timing of his death could not have been any better. He lived long enough to fulfill his purpose, but not so long as to linger on in misery while watching his enemies dismantle his legacy. To just about any traditional Chinese scholar politician who came after him, Xian lived the perfect life. Soon after the death of Xian, the Northern Headquarters Army stopped its northward advance for good to take up defensive positions along the Yellow River, ending this iteration of the Northern expeditions. Not long afterwards, Xie Xuan resigned his command of the Northern Headquarters Army to go into retirement, soon dying of illness in 388. But although the Xie family lost its key position at court after the retirements of Xie'an and Xie Xuan, its fortunes remained. For the next century and a half, the Xie clan of Chen Commandery, along with the Wang clan of Langya, maintained their statuses as the two wealthiest, most influential southern families, to the point that the phrase Wang Xie became synonymous with exclusive, entrenched generational wealth. Southern society during this time was highly stratified, and for members of the other families, a marriage alliance with the Wangs or the Xies meant joining ranks with the elite of the elite in society. As the centuries of the 300s came to a close, the relative stability that had existed under the leaderships of Xian in the south and Fujian in the north gave way to growing chaos. In the south, the government at Jian again became mired in court politics, and even more court politics. In the north, the barbarian groups again fragmented into competing states, and even more competing states. How all this chaos will play out, though, will be for the next video.